Welcome to Workplace Psychology with Dr. Martha Greidick. I'm Dr. Martha Greidick. This podcast examines a wide variety of work-related issues through the lens of industrial and organizational psychology. And while many of the topics discussed here may be seen as intended for white-collar employees and their employers, in reality, the ideas presented here are applicable across organizations and industries. Additionally, many of the topics discussed here may be applicable outside of the workplace. I encourage you to examine what's presented here, apply what makes sense to you, and simply discard the rest. Are you what others would consider to be a people pleaser? Maybe this is something that you realize as a trait within yourself, or maybe it's something that others claim to be one of your most recognized traits. People pleasers tend to put others and others' needs ahead of their own. And while it may sound noble on the surface, and to some degree it is, there is a line that when it is crossed, it can become more detrimental to the people pleaser himself or herself than anything else. Of course, for those who may be considered as people pleasers, this kind of behavior is something that isn't limited to one's personal life. So if you're a people pleaser, it's something that surely bleeds into the workplace and affects your time there. As I already alluded to it, people pleasing can come in different degrees, and in its most severe cases, it can lead to some serious problems, especially when we look at people-pleasing behaviors and attitudes over a long period of time. People-pleasing can be problematic, especially when we look at the more severe cases, if you will. People pleasers can be easier to be taken advantage of. This is something that is worthy of paying attention to when we consider your experience at the workplace. People pleasers tend to take on more than what they can handle, whether that's the number of tasks they agree to or the sheer volume of responsibilities that they take on. People pleasers can become resentful towards those who are on the receiving end of their own efforts. And in a more severe example, people pleasers can become burnt out. There's only so much giving you can do and so much putting everybody else ahead of your own needs that you can do before it affects you. People pleasers tend to have a difficult time in changing their ways. It's difficult to say no to others, and it's difficult to set boundaries. It may feel like setting boundaries or telling people no is mean or detrimental in some way to you, when in fact it could be helpful to you. This may be an especially difficult situation at the workplace. People may simply feel that they don't have the option to say no or to redefine their boundaries with others at work. They may think to themselves, well, how can I be a good teammate or a good colleague if I tell somebody no, or if I turn down their requests? Some people may worry that if they say no or set new boundaries or redefine their boundaries with others at work, they may not be able to move ahead or move forward in the company to get promotions or bonuses. And of course, as is the human nature for most, they may worry that redefining their boundaries or telling people no or declining their requests may lead to people not liking them anymore. It's not difficult to see why setting new boundaries, redefining your boundaries at work with your coworkers could be helpful, especially if you're a serious people pleaser and if your behaviors are affecting you and the quality of your time at work. Remember that redefining your boundaries is a process, so it will take some time and effort. But it's also a learning process, both for you as the person who is working towards the change and for those who interact with you, for those around you. The first thing to do is to recognize and understand your own limits. People pleasers often operate as if there were no limits to their own abilities, but of course that is untrue. And this is where being stressed out, burnt out, unhappy can come into play when you operate under the assumption that there is no limit to what you can do for others, and you continue to agree to any requests that come your way. So it's important as your first step to recognize your own limits. After all, you're not a machine. You are a human being who needs boundaries, who needs to be able to say no, who needs to be able to rest and unplug and have a life outside of the office. This brings me to the next point, which is to make sure that you make time for yourself every single day, whether that means taking regular breaks at work, which you should be doing, whether that means taking some time to yourself after work, outside of work, in your personal life. All of those should come into play for you, because chances are, if you are a people pleaser, that is likely the last thing on your to-do list. So make sure to make time for yourself every single day. It's so easy to forget that and to forgo that whole idea. But when I say make time for yourself, that means being very deliberate and very proactive in having time for yourself. It's important that you redefine your role at the workplace. Now, I'm not talking about the general role that you have within the organization. I'm talking about that people pleaser role. If you see yourself as the company's go-to person, there's no need for that. You can definitely let go of that. You can remain to be a valuable resource for your employer, for your colleagues, for your teammates, without being the first go-to person, the first or only resource for everybody else. So it's very, very important that you redefine your own role. If you see yourself in a role that translates into a people pleaser, even if you have a different label to it, the end result is the same. So it's time that you redefined your own role. It's okay to be reliable. It's okay to be a valuable resource, but it's not okay to be the only person that everybody goes to, because that's how you become overwhelmed with everybody's requests and with too many responsibilities. So make sure you redefine your role as part of this process of change. It's important that you practice setting boundaries. This is a process. You may have to start small. For some of you, it will be beneficial to start setting boundaries in your mind. So practice in a mental capacity only. It allows you to become less uncomfortable, to a point where you become comfortable with setting boundaries, but you're just doing it in your head so that it's not so threatening to you. But at the same time, you're getting your brain and your emotions used to the idea of setting boundaries. Once you're comfortable with that, You may want to start setting boundaries outside of the workplace in your personal life. That may be a little less scary for some of you. So if that's something that may be helpful, start by practicing with people outside of the workplace. And of course, the ultimate goal to practice setting boundaries is to do that at the workplace. But remember, you can work your way up to it. It doesn't have to be drastic. It doesn't have to be scary, but it has to happen. So start small, work your way up, and keep at it. Remember, practice makes better. Expect some pushback and resistance from others. That's normal. People are not used to your new redefined boundaries, so they'll have to learn how to operate within those new parameters. But you can also expect some pushback and resistance from yourself. Remember, people-pleasing has been your way for a long time. So this is something that you have to learn too. So don't be surprised if you get some pushback and resistance from yourself. After all, old habits take some time to go away. So don't be surprised or discouraged by it. Don't let that derail you. You have to keep practicing setting boundaries and sticking with it. Pushback and resistance is part of the process, and that's okay. Don't give up and don't feel the need to explain yourself. That's when you can get yourself into trouble and start digging a deeper hole than you need. When you feel like you have to explain yourself, like you owe an explanation to everybody, you simply need to adapt this new set of boundaries. And at the most, if you feel like you need to say something, you may want to resort to something to the effect of, this is what I can do at this time. Meaning, these other things I cannot do at this time. And that's where it ends. So don't feel the need to provide lengthy explanations with the hope that others will grant you their affirmation of what you're doing and give you their permission. That can only lead to more stress for you. Adopt a new attitude that matches your new role, whether that's with the organization, your colleagues, your boss, your subordinates, people outside of work. If you're going to successfully redefine your role from a people pleaser to someone who is not driven and controlled by the need to please others, then you have to adopt a new attitude. You can't be a people pleaser pretending not to be one and expect to be successful. Remember that this is a process with its own learning curve, so don't beat yourself up. When you have a setback, just get right back on that horse and keep trying. Remember, practice makes better. Change is your responsibility. If you don't take any action towards change, you cannot expect others to change. You may have heard that nothing changes if nothing changes, and this is a perfect example for that. As this episode comes to an end, let's review what was discussed. Some of you may identify as people pleasers, and that can make things more challenging in life. This can be especially detrimental for your experience at the workplace. You can be taken advantage of as a people pleaser. You may take on more than you can handle, and you can be more stressed out and even burnt out, perhaps even resentful when you focus solely on pleasing others. But there are things that you can do to change your role from a people pleaser to someone who takes care of themselves and has healthy boundaries with others. The first thing to do is to recognize your own limits and to make some time for yourself every single day. Remember that you are a human being, not a robot. So you have to learn how to take care of yourself and not put everybody else ahead of you all of the time. Redefine your role, whether that's in your relationship with a company, your colleagues, your boss, or your subordinates. As long as you hang on to that role of a people pleaser, nothing will change for you. So it's so important that you redefine your own role. Practice setting boundaries. You may have to start small, but you have to start somewhere. And remember, practice makes better. If and when you get pushback from others or even from yourself, keep on going. Pushback is to be expected. It's new and everybody needs time to get adjusted to it. So don't despair and don't get discouraged. Pushback is a normal part of the process. Give yourself the time that you need to relearn your own behaviors or new behaviors and to redefine your role. Remember, it's a learning process with its own learning curve, so don't be so hard on yourself. As the week unfolds, I invite you to examine your own people-pleasing habits. You may be a serious people pleaser, or you may just be someone who dabbles. But remember, for you dabblers, this may become a problem, a greater problem over time. So keep your people-pleasing in check. While there's nothing wrong with taking care of others and pleasing others, there has to be a balance. You have to be able to take care of yourself first and foremost. It's a little bit like that analogy of the instructions that you get on the airplane. If the oxygen masks are released from the ceiling, it's your responsibility to put your mask on first before you can help anybody else. It's the same thing here. So take a look at your own habits and see if and where you can improve them. For those of you who are experiencing this podcast in an audio-only version, I invite you to check out my YouTube channel where you can find the video version of this podcast. The link for that is in the description below. In addition to the video version of the podcast, my YouTube channel also contains videos that focus on stress management. So I encourage you to check it out. Thank you for joining me today. Please subscribe to this podcast. I look forward to seeing you here again next time. Until then, I wish you joy and well-being.